Okay, we are back with another Between the Pages book chat, and today's guest is Stanley Wheeler, and we're here to talk about his Flintlock fantasy series, Tomahawks and Dragonfire. And I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself, so take it away.
Thanks, Anita. As you said, my name is Stanley Wheeler, and I am from Idaho, west of the Rockies. There's just one state between us and the ocean. That would be Oregon in the south, and Washington in the north. I have been a writer, like most writers, most of my life, but it's only in recent years that I've actually put things out to get published. I grew up farming and doing dairy work and construction, custom hay, swathing and baling, and basically the farm life. And so I think perhaps that a little bit of that is reflected in my writing, but it's certainly not a central theme, because there's so much exciting stuff going on in other things and in other ways than just the farm. What I did learn about being on the farm was that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So now I practice law. I'm employed as a deputy prosecuting attorney in Wheeler, Idaho, and it's a job I quite enjoy.
Oh, that sounds like an interesting switch from farmer to lawyer.
Well, I had some steps in between.
Worked, I would hope law school.
Yeah, law school was one of those steps, and I was actually working at a company that made word processing software for Arabic and Persian, because I graduated with a degree in Near Eastern Studies. And it was while I was at that company, and I could see that the end was nigh for that company. It wasn't going to last. And that was when I decided, okay, I needed to take the step and go to law school, which is something I had planned on years before, but had been dissuaded by an attorney who told me how grim and gloomy it was. And I had let that dissuade me for a number of years. But I went to law school and mostly enjoyed it. Clerked for a judge in Eastern Idaho. It was a real great experience. And then I went into practice for myself, opened up my own law practice in my hometown, and practiced there for a number of years. Did a short stint in Nevada, working at a title company. And then I came back here to Idaho, and where I'm now at the county prosecutor's office.
Cool. Okay, so why don't you give everyone an overview of your book?
My book. Well, the series, at least the first trilogy, is called the Tomahawks and Dragon Fire series. And as you might expect from the name, it is set in the Americas. Specifically, it is set in North America during the American Revolutionary War. And it's a time when there were dragons that had, I don't want to say interacted with, but there was conflict between the early settlers. For instance, the Roanoke colony, there's no mystery there. The dragons burned it. But the dragons were drawn away for a time. They had some things going on in the West. And so a lot of the history developed similarly to as we would know it, the actual history, with some minor modifications. And then we get to the Revolutionary War, and also the dragons are coming back because the things that kept them away have disappeared, and they're coming back to reclaim their territory and their people. And into this mix, we have the main characters are Alex, who is on an island, perhaps Bermuda, and he has plans. He has plans to go back to England, be a barrister there to practice law. He's an indentured servant, but he also has had time to study and read the law with an individual named Jonathan. And he's engaged. He has great plans, but the revolution and a person in the book who's called the Commander, he basically destroys Alex's life and his plans, And so Alex is swept into the revolution unwillingly. He is actually not a fan of the revolution or the American colonists. He is firmly in the British camp at the start of things. But events sweep him into the revolution. One of those persons is a French girl named Lucette. And she has a map, a map to Cartier's cache. You may remember that historically, Jacques Cartier had invested a lot of time in finding some special rocks and stones in the New World that he thought were going to be very valuable, but when he got them back to the Old World, they were not. Anyway, so it plays a little bit along that historical bit there. So but they have this map to the cache that has important magical stones that give great power. In fact, this individual that I've called the commander, he's in possession of one of these stones, and he has great power. One of those is the power to command people to do his will, almost to usurp their will and make him do as he commands. And he is high in the British hierarchy of the army, and he's leading the troops against the revolution. So Alex gets swept into that along with Lucette. She has the map. There are a number of colorful characters that I could probably just sit and talk about them, because as a writer, you know that as you write about them, you get to know them more and more, and you get more attached to them. You find things that you like about them. But overall, that's the overall setting, and the first book, which is entitled Threading the Rude Eye, which is actually a take on a Shakespeare quote from, and that right now I forget the play, but one of the characters talk of, anyway, he says, unthread the rude eye of revolution, of rebellion. And so I've taken the title from that, calling it Threading the Rude Eye. They're threading the rude eye of rebellion as they have to pass through revolutionary Boston to get to where they're going. Along the way, they encounter dragon hunters who've been sent by the king to capture, actually not capture, but to kill and take a certain part of the dragon back to England because the king wants this very much. And so that's the setup for the first book, Threading the Rude Eye.
Okay, so what were your inspirations for writing the book? Why the Revolutionary War? Why flintlock fantasy?
That's a real good question. Sometimes I look and I think, is flintlock fantasy dead? I don't see a lot of new flintlock fantasies coming out there. I mean, you've got the standards of McClellan's series and Django Wexler's series. Adrian Tchaikovsky has some. I've not read his, and there are several others, of course. But I'm not finding any new ones that are coming out there. My actual inspiration, I got the idea for this story not set in revolutionary times, but set back in the pre-Columbian days. And so that's where the source of it comes from. And I actually wrote the start of that. And then as I thought about it more, I got to the point where I thought, the story I really want to tell is the story that takes place during the American Revolution. Because I'm a student of history. I love history. I don't claim to be an expert either on the Revolution or any other aspect of history. But I do love it, and I do love to study it. And in fact, when I was in law school, there was a series by, I believe his name is Page Smith, and two of the volumes deal with the American Revolutionary War. And so I would read that series in between my law studies and take copious notes just because I found it so fascinating. So that's kind of how it evolved to move to the Revolutionary War. That kind of seized me, and I wanted to. That's what I wanted to write about. Was in that setting. The adventures really follow the individuals, not the whole revolution per se, but it's in that setting, and there is some interaction with historical figures as well as historical events.
Okay. So, well, tell us about the main characters. What are they like? Their flaws, their good points?
Well, let me start with Alex. Alex is learning the law. He plans on being a barrister, and he loves the law, and he wants things to be the way they should be, and the way the law says they should be. One of the things that happens early in the book when we meet him is he's upset with a vendor who has brought in a load of a cargo of some small casks of wine for the business that he's an indentured servant to. And he argues with the ship owner because the ship owner has raised the price, the shipping costs, because of the revolution. And he's upset about that and threatens to sue. And he's kind of childish and petulant, wants to get his way. He knows what the law is and knows that, we had a contract and it needs to be honored. But there are other influences in Alex's life that help him to understand that sometimes being right isn't the most important thing. And so he's on this journey of learning to acquire both knowledge and maturity, as well as to learn to use this power, this same power that the commander has. And that's part of his journey is understanding that power and using it in the right ways, because it's certainly open to abuse.
All right. So why did you add dragons to the story? Not that I'm complaining, mind you, I love dragons, but I'm curious as to what Revolutionary War and dragons, why you combined those two.
Yeah. Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody take something, the Revolutionary War is pretty exciting all by itself. And dragons are pretty much a staple of, the epic fantasy, medieval type fantasy. Why would you crash those two together like, you got your chocolate in my peanut butter, no, you got your peanut butter in my chocolate type of thing. I think dragons are fascinating. There are other mythical creatures that we'll come across, but they are the dragons are the most. I don't want to say exciting, but they're the most dynamic. They have the greatest impact. And while I can't really say for sure what made me make that choice, I thought it would be interesting to put them together. And I think other people have done it. I think many years ago, there was a book called, I forget if it was called American Dragon or, I just cannot remember the name or the author. I've not read it. I came across references to it some time back after I'd already begun my work on this story, and thought, oh, well, somebody has done that before. And I saw another author, Justin Fike, I believe is his name, similar. I think he has a Far Shores trilogy I've heard him talk about, or series, that is also set in the Americas and has some mythical creatures in it as well. But again, I'm not familiar with it. I just know that I'm not the first person to put these together.
Yeah, well, you should watch the interview I did with him. You'll find out all about it. Actually, the series of his, it sounds very interesting, as does yours. And dragons pop up everywhere, so I don't blame you for using dragons. They're a fun creature to work with.
They have an overpowering sense. That they're not easily defeated. They demand attention and they demand to get their way. So they make great antagonists. I know many people make them the friends or protagonists, but I prefer them as the antagonist, or at least as an antagonist.
Okay, so what is the hardest type of scene for you to write in the series?
The scene where I don't know what's going to happen yet. When I write the series, and the second book, well, if I can get that in the camera, the second book is called Power to Hurt. It happens to be the only one in the series that I have with me at the moment. The way I write, and actually the first trilogy, the Tomahawks and Dragon Fire, we were on a camp out. We went to the Seven Devils area in the Hell's Canyon area in Idaho. And while I was on that camp out, I outlined the story. I had 12 major points and lots of subpoints underneath. but when I started writing, that was all supposed to be one book, but that turned into 3 books. So the characters sometimes just take me away to places where I didn't plan on going, and so that sometimes is difficult to write. In that, okay, this is a surprise to me. I hadn't anticipated it. How is that going to happen and weave into the rest of the story like I've envisioned it?
Yeah, I know the feeling. Okay, so what was your favorite type of scene to write in the series?
Oh, favorite type. Well, there are lots of action scenes, and I have to admit that I do enjoy writing those. So while that's one of my favorites, I have a hard time deciding between whether that's my favorite or whether some of the more intimate scenes between 2 people or very few people that are talking as they get to know each other, as they ask each other difficult questions, new things come to life that I hadn't thought of because the characters thought to ask the questions that I had not thought to ask. And it's kind of it's an amazing discovery, and sometimes it can be kind of touching. Another book that I've written is called Smoke. It's set in 1948. It's a detective noir novel. And I just fell in love with the time period. And one of the things that I really enjoyed were the quiet conversations between the main character and another one of the characters. And so I've had moments like that in this series as well. They're kind of touching.
Yeah, I know those scenes can be fun to write and to read. So you mentioned the secondary characters. Are any of them scene stealers in the book?
Oh yes, one of my favorites of those is Antonio. He has a much longer name, but I can't remember all of it. But it's one of those Spanish names that tacks on several names. And Antonio, him and Captain Charles Rip are important characters, but they're not the main characters. They're a pair of smugglers. And Antonio is bigger than life. He has a many, what would you call, girlfriends that he is fond of reminiscing about, although he usually gets cut off before he gets too far into it. Otherwise, he will go on and on. But he also remembers big. Not everything that he remembers happened exactly like he remembers it, but he does tell a great story. And he's flamboyant. He's a fun character. I enjoy writing him.
Yeah, he sounds fun. So, which character in the series would you like to hang out with in real life?
Oh, most of them. I think Felgar and Cat would be kind of fun. They're both Irish. They're part of the Dragon Hunters. Cat is almost the leader. Cat or Catherine is almost the leader of one of the groups of Dragon Hunters. They're 2 separate groups. And Felgar is a big, burly, bearded. They both have red hair and like big lion's mane. Felgar's a big, burly guy. He may not be the sharpest pencil in the box, but he has a good heart, and he is willing to help and to fight and to do what his sister tells him, because he knows that's usually what's best. So Felgar and Cat, I really enjoy. Akira and Hugh are the other 2 characters in that group. They're both from Britain, although Akira is originally from Japan. And Hugh is a little more, not nefarious, but a little more self-oriented, I think might be the way to put it. Akira is a good leader, but he's a hands-off leader. And he has a lot of wisdom, Japanese proverbs that he will share at appropriate times to help the rest of his group maybe come to a decision or understand a point. Yeah, I like those. Lieutenant Roberts, a British Marine. Initially, he's an interesting character. In fact, he was just a side throwaway character. He has become a major character whose importance to the story cannot be denied. He's interesting in his early stages, very likable, but he's put in difficult circumstances.
Yeah, I had one of those characters in my trilogy. He was supposed to be a one-off, and then he took a larger role in books 2 and 3.
Yeah, some of them just step out and do that, don't they?
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned you wrote a detective noir novel as well. Are there any other genres that you have written in or would like to write in?
The answer to that is yes. I even have this one with me. If I can show you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Smoke, that's my detective novel. My wife wants me to do a sequel to that one. I haven't yet. I will someday. The first two books I wrote, or the first book I wrote, was actually a Western based on some incidents in Idaho history that I fictionalized the characters. So that was the first book that I wrote back in 2012. I published that on Amazon, although I had actually wrote it in about 2000, 2002, and then it had sat for 10 years. I've also written a sort of an alternate universe fantasy set in Weiser, Idaho, and the main character goes through, he's sucked into kind of an alternate fantasy world of his hometown. That's what I've written in so far. I do want to write more in the detective noir genre. I'd also like to write a good pirate story. I think that would be fun.
Yeah, pirate stories are fun. I threw some pirates in my trilogy is a nautical fantasy, and I threw some pirates in book 3. They were fun to write.
But when we talked before the show started, I was wondering if maybe you had incorporated some of those things you told me about in the history.
Yeah, well, the fantasy is set in a separate world from our world, but yeah, okay. I threw in a few nautical knowledge from my upbringing. So, and then I had to go research it to make sure it was accurate, which was fun. Anyway, so I think that's where we'll wrap it up for here. And why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and your books?
Great. My books are available at Amazon under the author's name, Stanley Wheeler. I have a blog that I write in weekly, stanleywheeler.blogspot.com. I have a Facebook page, but it's my personal page. I don't have an author page. Perhaps I'll set one of those up at some point. Anita, I certainly thank you for letting me come on with your interview and spend this time together. It was interesting to get to know you before the show, and I appreciate you letting me babble on and on about my books.
Oh, it was a pleasure to talk to you, and your series sounds very interesting, as does your detective noir. That's one of my favorite genres, actually. It's the detective noir stories.
Great.
Anyway, so thank you for being here. And the next Between the Pages book chat will be on Saturday of next week. So be sure and join us then. So that's all for now, and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.